I'm the play-by-play guy. He's the color commentator. So, all right, if we're ready, then you guys thumbs up? Awesome, awesome. So I'm gonna play a little video to get us introduced to what we're talking about today, and then I'll make some introductions with Chuck and I. So I think all I have to do is hit OK. Don't try that at home. Awesome. There we go. All right, so I'm Mike Mahoney. I'm Director of Channel Sales with LiveU, covering U.S. and Canada. I've got my partner in crime here, Chuck Davidson, who covers federal and a lot of the other areas that I can't get to as well. But we're kind of here to talk to you a little bit about LiveU, introduce who we are if you're not familiar with us already, and then talk about some of the new use cases we have for our transport technology, and hopefully show you some things you haven't seen before. For those that aren't familiar with LiveU, we've been around for about 18 years in the broadcast and sports space. We basically replaced satellite trucks back in the day when all you could do to get a live hit for news was to send out a sat truck or microwave truck and be able to get a point-to-point hit for those live news. Now what you're seeing is folks going around with backpacks that you can see in our booth downstairs, and that's how they get their live hits. But as you can tell, we've got a lot of customers. There's over 10 terabytes of data being pushed through every day. We had over 2,000 units globally in the last 2 weeks that were covering the U.S. elections alone. So for all the networks, that's kind of where we come from. But what we're here to talk about today is a little bit about what is LiveU and why are we different, and it all comes down to our LRT, or LiveU Reliable Transport Protocol, and what makes us different. And we'll get a little bit into that here later in the presentation. But initially we were designed for production, for mobile deployment, ease of use, and just be able to sort of meet the demands of our broadcasters. And now we're trying to also meet the demands of first responders, public safety, for mission critical situational awareness. So what are the trends we're seeing in this industry? And this is what our customers are telling us and what our partners, our technology partners, are telling us as well. It's all about the growing volume of video that's coming out there, and how do I have AI enhance and make my job more efficient, and whether that's facial detection, gunshot detection, all of these different things to sort of minimize the threat or make the threat awareness more clear. That's really what they're trying to do. And then sort of how do they do that is AI for video analytics. It's all about how do I store this video, but then how do I get this to the people that can make those command decisions. It's one thing for one person to see the video when I'm flying a drone or I'm manning a dog, but it's the other thing to say, well, I've got officers in the field who are in harm's way and they need the same video to make the same decision, and the more informed they are, the better, right? So these are sort of the trends that we're seeing out there in the industry, and the way they're solving this is putting together any number of solutions, all of which they're trying to grab off the shelf to figure out how do we share a video more efficiently. And so what this does is it presents a lot of challenges, right? At the end of the day, what we want is the ability to share low latency video, meaning 1 to 2 seconds minimum, not be able to have YouTube think about it and wait for 10 to 30 seconds, even though they call it ultra low latency, but I need to be able to have it time sensitive, meaning I need that footage now. And I also have to do it in areas where I don't have a network connection. I don't have a LAN or a WAN. I don't have a hockey puck here, which decided to quit right before the presentation, so that's awesome. So I've got to be able to overcome these network destinations, and oh, by the way, I've got to share it on multiple platforms, right? And so these are the challenges that are being faced today. So how do they address that? What does a system look like to sort of address this? And so if you had to draw a picture of what that all is, it's really about, the devices we brought today are just basically cameras with a quadruped or camera with wings, but the idea is that any camera source needs to be able to get to the folks that need to see that footage, right? And so at the end of the day, where we bring that ability is I need a mobile solution that can tie into cellular, can tie into LAN or WAN, can tie into mesh, can tie into satellite, all those kinds of things. And then I need to be able to do a low latency transport, not only to the people in the field, but also people in a command vehicle, people in City Hall, as well as what if I have other agencies on the field, on the ground that are doing it. So for example, a lot of this technology was used in North Carolina when the hurricane came through. And then at the end of the day too, for a lot of public safety and first responders, they need to be able to get into their evidentiary system so they can have chain of custody and use that for future cases, right? And so at the end of the day, what we did is we came out with a unit here that's brand new that we're going to be announcing here in a couple of weeks. You guys are getting a first look at it. And it's called Recon 1, and the idea being that it has an IP or an HDMI input, and a lot of these devices that you see now are now not going to have a baseband video signal like an SDI from a professional camera or an HDMI even from a regular phone, which I'm doing with screen mirroring and how I control these drones and robots, but they're going to have an IP video stream, which is going to come across LAN or an RJ45 cable. So now we've got a unit that is going to have both HDMI for all those ones that are already out there, but also IP for some of the new formats that are coming. The other thing too is we can't really have, and I'll show you an example of these, we can't really have these bright orange cases that we have for our units because these people are in the field and they're in operations. So they need to be able to sort of be hidden from point of view. So we're making a black case, and you can kind of see an example of this, right? And the rest of those features you can kind of read for yourself, but we're going to go over a couple of examples later in the presentation about the 3 different modes that these units really are. And think of these as a Swiss Army knife with 3 blades. One of them is going to be video bridge for transport, one's going to be data bridge for a super hotspot, if you will, and one's going to be file bridge for uploading files. So if you think about it that way, let's go back to what is LRT and sort of how this works. And if you ask the engineers, this is what they're going to put in a slide and make you read through all that stuff. But at the end of the day, what it is how do I get the video from A to B? And what it's about is being able to take all that IP that you give the encoder, separating all those data bytes and load balancing all those IP connections, whether it's multiple cellular modems, cellular carriers, satellite, LAN, WAN, doesn't matter. We're just going to spread those data bytes out and effectively sort of load balance that as the unit's on the move, because it's not always going to be still. And so this is the technology behind how that works, and this is sort of something we've had for about 18 years now. And so what happens is now you combine LRT with the bonding protocol, but it's also an encoder. So as you're taking this video input from any of these devices, it's also doing H.265, which is sort of the latest version of encoding. So you can get a nice HD quality signal at about 4 megabits a second, or 1.9 gigs an hour. So that's very low latency. So now all I need is about a 5 megabit pipe. So when you go to some of these far out places where you're having to capture this video, you may only have a hockey puck and says this guy gets about 1 or 2 megabits. But what if I had 8 hockey pucks or 4 hockey pucks? Well, now I can get 4 to 8 megabits. So you start adding these together, take LRT, and it combines all that to make a bigger pipe to be able to send that information through, right? And so it's also making sure that it's network aware so that it can combine both video and data and send that down the same pipe. And so these are a couple of examples. I know I'm snapping fast, so if you guys have questions, slow me down. But these are all sort of the availability of what IP that we can bring to the system. So whether it's cellular, satellite, which is traditional satellite, high Earth orbit satellites, Ka, Ku, BGAN. That's the stuff we've been using for 30 plus years. It's how you got network television today. Wi-Fi and LAN, but LEO is sort of fairly new on the scene. So if you're not familiar with that, that's low Earth orbit solutions like Starlink, OneWeb, and a couple of others that are coming out there. The nice thing about the LEO satellites is they're just another network port inside the encoder. And so all we're doing is it's another IP source. Now we can leverage that as well. And it's especially important when you're in places like, let's say, the hurricanes that came through Florida recently. We were able to have not only news crews, but also public safety crews and EMS be able to still get a video and an audio signal out because they were able to use LEO even though all the towers weren't powered or they were down. Right? So the idea is still being able to get video out even if I don't have cellular. We can't invent cellular, but we can come up with other ways to get around if cellular's not there. And so at the end, you start with that encoder, you have the LRT bonding, and then what you're sending to is sort of the other end. Think of it like a video fax machine. You've got to send and receive, and so on the receive end, it could be as simple as a 1RU server that gives you your SDI out, that gives you, your feeds into the system for feeding a multi-viewer in the highest res possible. And so, typical broadcast workflow that we're used to. But the other thing this can do also is sort of give you 1 to 4 feeds. So that same server can take 4 of these portable units. Now I've got, let's say, 2 drone feeds, and I've got an officer in the field, and I've got a dog. I bring all those into a central multi-viewer, and now my command and control gets to see all that in high resolution. Or I can feed that into a mobile command bus and be able to see that while I'm on the go. Right? But the other part is, how do I do that if I want to be able to share it with officers in the field? And so what happens is we have this thing called a cloud channel. So think of that as that server that decodes it on-prem, but now I'm sending it to the cloud and I'm decoding it there. And the reason you'd want to do that is so now what happens is I can go in and decode that signal in the cloud, create a web page that's dedicated to these devices with an expiring link that you set the code on. It could be 15 minutes, could be 4 hours, could be 4 days. But the idea being, I don't want to have to do user authentication for officers in the field that need operational awareness right now. So it's always a combination of, I want it highly secure, but I got to wait for a while to get it. Or you know what, I need it right now, so I'm going to less security and I'm going to be able to share a link. Right? And so that's what this is being able to create a quick video return via a link that we were playing with earlier for those that were early to class and got to see this. And actually we're going to test this out a little bit. So what I'm bringing up on the screen now is, click the right button, is a couple of examples, right? So now we have the drone here, we have the dog here, and he's moving it around. If you scan either one of those QR codes, you're actually going to get the feed, which is feeding into either one of our encoders, which I have underneath the system here. And these are all just sitting here feeding from the. I've actually got the 2 phones that are driving the unit. He's just making the dog dance. But the idea being, it's going to a cloud channel, going to server, and now sharing that with up to 40 people at the same time. Of course, my drone stopped flying, so I'll tell it to fly so you don't see the signal. There you go. But that's sort of how it works. And again, I can come back to these in a minute, but I want to just sort of get the idea of this is how we share video for situational awareness out in the field. Chuck? Yeah, okay. So really what this gives you is, it's very flexible, it's easy to use, and the idea being that you don't need to be an expert in the field. As an officer, I just want to see the video so I can make a decision because I'm a SWAT commander, I'm a regular officer, I'm part of EMS, or I'm in the fire, and I just need to go, a higher level view of what's happening. These are all the features that they're looking for in that same workflow, and that's kind of what LiveU is trying to give you, is send in mechanics, send in dogs and drones and everything else before you put human lives on the line. And when you do put those lives on the line, give them the best information to make the best decision. And so that's really what it's about. So where are we actually seeing success with these units is really in all these different areas, right? The immediate one is PD and SWAT and training exercises, but it's also EMS for emergency, especially in the southeast where we've had hurricanes over the last couple of months and we've been going there. But we're also seeing this in other markets as well, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But for any city of and state of, this is where we're seeing a lot of this happen right now. I would say in the state of Florida, we probably have 50 agencies that have a couple of these units that are trying those out, because the first thing I'll tell the agency, hey, if you've got a drone program, take a couple of units, try them out. And as soon as they do, they give them to the pilot goes, oh my gosh, people are leaving me alone. I can actually get my job done. I can go fly instead of worrying about 15 people behind me going, what's the drone see? And so this is the different areas that we're going to. And again, Chuck can speak to this as well, but we're trusted by a lot of city, state, federal agencies. These are just a couple of logos that are out there, and we've actually met a lot of the folks today during the show, especially around federal since we're here. But we've got many, many agencies that are either in testing or in that are customers already. They're using it. They just didn't know these use cases were available. Most of them today have been using us for, call it public information office, you know, the PIOs or public affairs, or they're just connecting to broadcast news and they're doing a live news hit or what have you, but they're not used to using these for situational awareness. Does this make sense so far? Any add-on there, Chuck? Or? No?
I mean, I think what's impressive is if you would have seen this slide, or if it existed even 2 years ago, half those logos wouldn't be up there. You know, so we're seeing over the last 2.5 years, we've seen tremendous interest and adoptance in a lot of cases in federal agencies, from DOD, DHS, Homeland Security, and I think the thing that I take away when I listen to it is it's always being able to take the broadcast quality technology and have it relevant for other industries, and that's the big takeaway I think we've heard from agencies of all kinds, is that they're looking for a better quality experience. That's what they want. They want a low latency, very high quality video source. In our history in broadcast, that's not me. I did not do that. Our history in broadcast, I think, affords us that opportunity to have those conversations, right? And that's why you're starting to see logos, the list grow.
Agreed. So I wanted to pull up a few slides from our technology partner, because I happen to bring a Skydio drone here. It's American made. They're very, very popular. But it's not that we don't work with everybody else, right? So you see a whole list behind me here of all these different drone technologies. This is also where I bring in the feature I spoke about earlier, which is called Data Bridge, because a lot of times when you get a drone, what happens is they have their own cloud management platforms, and the reason is because they've built a lot of capabilities in those. So whether that one slide that I had that talked about a video management system and the evidentiary path of all that video, what you need to be able to do is two things. One, to have this video shared for all the officers, but you also need to feed into their platforms. And a lot of times what happens is I'm sending a live video feed for all the officers in the field, but I'm sending files and data up to their cloud platforms. And so we can actually take these units and turn one modem into a super hotspot, or 4 of these, but now it's across all providers. And so it gives them the ability to not only do video transmission, which is what we're built for, but also say, hey, do you just need a super hotspot to be able to get files up as well? Yes, we can do that. And these are all the different types of drone vendors that we're working with. And it's also why I wanted to point out a lot of these are IP-based, because some of these are earlier or newer technologies. You'll also notice the Parrot and the Lockheed there. Those are military drones, but they're starting in IP. Everything that goes in military eventually works its way down to our level. That's what's coming in the future, is this IP, which is why we sort of made that technology. You can see the Boston Dynamics dog there too. If you checked our LinkedIn page, we've done some videos with the BD dog as well. This one, just to give you an idea, is around $3,000, sort of a little toy robot. Boston Dynamics starts at about $90,000, and they feature up at about $250,000. And the reason is because they can go a lot longer, they can go a lot further, they're used for perimeter patrol, for everything else. The question is, how do they get that video and share it, and that's where we're starting to work with them. So I wanted to at least give you a quick video and show you a little bit about drone as first responder for those that haven't heard about it, and I think this gives you a quick idea of what it is, and then we can sort of dive into that. And then also, the other thing, if you'll know, if you've gotten your FAA certification for being a drone pilot, you always have to have line of sight. What this is actually a DFR program, and you notice they had that cool future-looking dock. It actually allows them to control the drones without actually having eyes on the drone and have it fly by itself autonomously. And so what they're doing is using the camera to see where the drone is, but they got this approved because Skydio, in addition to NYPD, wrote for the FAA to get them approval to be able to fly autonomously in the city. And so that took a lot of work, but now they're able to send drones out, but they don't always have to have spotters on every building to figure out where the drones are. So kind of an interesting use case. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Let's go to the next one. So again, I left this slide in here for those that want a copy of this and want to be able to check it out. I was just at Skydio Ascend about a month and a half ago, and this was just a lot of the different sessions that were in there. And for those municipalities that are in here that said, hey, I'd be interested to learn more about what is DFR and how do I get funding and grants and certifications and all that kind of stuff, a lot of that content is built in here. So definitely take a look. I just showed you the DFR video. Axon Accelerate is another partner, because Axon is probably the guys that are most familiar because they make the body cameras, the suits, the vests. They're sort of the 800-pound gorilla in this industry. But they actually work very, very closely with Skydio because they have API connections. We're, again, just the transport. The other thing that we have to sort of be in line with as well is video management systems, and that was that right side of the diagram I brought up earlier, and also real-time crime centers. So difference being the VMS is really sort of that cloud-based platform that everybody gets access to and shares. Oh, that's funny. Well, you'll see it's too hot. All right, drone's a little hot. We'll turn it off for a little while. We don't want it to burn up. It's the funny thing about the drone batteries, if you don't fly, it gets really hot. So anyway, the RTCs, the video management systems are really the cloud-based platforms that give them all the capabilities. The real-time crime centers are basically taking that platform and presenting it in such a way that's a single pane of glass so that anybody within the organization, let's say a police department, will have access to that, whether it's on their phone, their tablet, or in the actual data center where they've got these giant walls of all the cameras and everything that's going on. That's where we're feeding into. And so the trick here is, again, that data bridge mode becomes important because now we're just feeding it files. And they're just displaying it in that single pane of glass. Because what they don't want is a LiveU interface, and then a Skydio interface, and then this, and then that. They want one place to be able to look at all this footage and see where it comes from. And these are a lot of the places we work with because they take not only the data files, but they'll also take a basic RTMP stream right out of our system. So it's very easy to sort of work with some of these guys. Again, if you have more questions about these, let us know. I even put a couple of manned aircraft because I know we've given examples of drones and dogs, but we're actually doing some work now in Florida and Washington, where we're actually using low airplanes that go about 1,500 to 3,000 feet, and they've got Churchill cameras on there, and they're using those for surveillance and security. And we're actually able to take one of our units, the bigger version of this, and actually be able to send that video back to the field, again at the same low latency, but now I'm in an aircraft. And so again, for surveillance, there's many ways to tackle that. It's also working in helicopters. The challenge with helicopters and planes, got to make sure, how often are they, NASCARing that thing, or how flat are they being and how high are they going? If they're staying below the 3,000-foot level, usually you're pretty good. What do they call that in Top Gun? The hard deck, I guess? The hard deck. The hard deck, yes. Don't go below the hard deck. So here's another example I thought I would play, just so you guys can understand how does AI fit into some of this, and what are some of the options you see there. So what's interesting is now, instead of being for public safety, let me just skip this section here, it's actually being used for inventory and rail yards and inventory places that just have sheer volume of stuff. They need to be able to either keep current inventory, but they can't always be on site. Again, another use for that dock that can be unmanned. On this one, I wanted to put up a couple examples, and again, I know I'm probably running up against time, but this is an example of taking the same technology we just talked about, same thing with drones, but now what I'm doing is I'm actually using a mapping platform to take the footage and the files, the high-res pictures from a drone, and build a digital twin. And the reason I'd want to do this is to be able to start looking at critical infrastructure like bridges and phone, and cable and dams and everything that's there to say, hey, are these things, are they good? Are they bad? And the problem is the DOTs out there don't have enough time in the day or enough personnel to get to every bridge every year. So you know for a fact that a lot of these are just old, but they can't be fixed. There's just not enough eyes in the day. And so what this is doing allow them to save 50 to 70% of their time, because now they can send 2 or 3 people out to do a drone survey, import that information into a platform like this example is GNext, and they'll be able to send the high-res video, make sure you got all the information you got in there first. Did you get everything, or do you need to zoom in another area before you go to the next survey? But then take the high-res files and actually build the digital twin, and then what happens is it goes up into a platform like GNext, and what GNext does is uses AI and goes, oh, okay, I can see the cracks here in the bridge. These are more serious, these aren't as deep. I can actually do measurements in there because now it's a super CAD model at the end of the day. And I can go see what's happening. And so it gives that information quicker, easier, and again, it's another use case that's actually, believe it or not, about 6 times bigger market than it is in public safety. So it's an interesting platform, and these are some of the examples of companies that we're working in. Again, how they're using the LiveU is for the real-time video to make sure they got the survey right and they don't have to go back. But they're also using the file bridge, because what happens is I go and shoot the drone, I get the live video. As soon as that drone comes down or I go charge a battery, I take that little SD card out, I insert it into one of our units, I put it in file bridge mode at a gig a minute. It's sending files while I'm driving to the next site. By the time I get to the next site, I take that card back out, put it in the drone, I can go keep shooting, and so I'm switching back and forth. Again, the Swiss Army knife approach. So, all right. See what else I got next here. I thought I had one more video. Let's see if this one is a good one for. So, pretty cool. Let's go to the next one here. So, anyway, the last couple slides here is just, again, I can share this presentation, but where can you learn more? And this is where we've got our one-pagers and our blog articles and white papers on everything about LiveU and sort of where we're helping. I even put a link here at the bottom on, if I'm with the police, how do I get access to that grant funding? What are some of the sources I can do to get a drone program started and certify my pilots and make sure our insurance is covered, and then all that good stuff before you get to the technology. And then we wrote some white papers here about sort of what are basically the summary of what this presentation is, but we put it in there in a lot more detail so that you can go grab that information both in a white paper of how are we working with public safety and all the challenges that they're facing and sort of how we're solving for those, but then also how is IP video happening and what's going on in the future is where that all is being used in all the different acquisition formats. So I think I'm at right about 38 minutes or so. I could go a million miles an hour here, but any questions before I go a couple examples at all? Either did really good or really, really bad. So I just wanted to show you a couple examples. I'll just jump through these real quick. But this is sort of what our video return portal looks like if you were able to scan that code earlier or if not. But this is what a typical drone is going to see. So for example, like this one, so you're going to see a camera shot. You can also see the thermal imagery. And so obviously the brighter the image, the hotter. So in fire situations, this is very important. It's also when you want to find somebody in the dark, because they're going to have a bigger heat signature. But again, whatever the drone pilot is seeing, you're basically screen mirroring that and putting this return portal, and everybody can see that as well. And you're also going to see whatever data is displayed. So it can have that KVM telemetry if you want as well. This is an example of a accident exercise that we did at B&A, where we closed down one of the runways and worked with MTSU and several of their the Tennessee Management Authority said, hey, let's go out, and they wanted to go out and do all this crash testing and practice and everything else. We're just like, well, why don't we just film this? Why don't you guys have cameras live? Let's get the drone feeds, let's get everything else. That feed you see on the bottom left, bottom right, is the the video return feed that we had coming from the drone, so they could see that in full screen, so everybody in the ops center could actually see what was going on. So again, just another test for them to try it out. MTSU is also a place where they're actually certifying drone pilots. They have a program just to do certification for public safety. So it's not like a bunch of guys want to fly drones or go, gaming and sports and everything else. They're actually learning to fly drones for public sector use cases. Another example, I'll skip through that one, is we actually work with, again, can't tell a lot of secrets here, but we actually put a bunch of Marshall lipstick cameras on Razors while they were doing some operational stuff in Texas, and they wanted to be able to film this live. The challenge is you can always film it, but then you're going to go after the fact, get an after action, but then what happens? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to have live action feeds from all the different exercises they're doing and then repurpose that later? This allowed them to say, you know what, maybe we should try this exercise, same one, let's do it a little bit differently. But I didn't have to wait 2 or 3 days for the editorial to happen. I could see what happened immediately and just use the live feeds. And again, this is in the middle of a nowhere deer ranch in Texas. So it's, it's all about bandwidth and connectivity. This is some of the aerial shots that we were getting with CBP we were doing in San Diego from both helicopter and airplane. And again, the idea being I need to be able to get this footage down to the ground so they can see it, and then for them to report back, hey, is there other stuff that we can do? And then lastly, here's an example of what we do for something similar to Super Bowl or an F1 track where the state and local PDs actually control the land and the land and everything that goes on from a security standpoint. But what a lot of people don't know is the Sierra 1 events, CBP controls the air. And so they're actually coming in, let's say New Orleans, or last year it was Las Vegas. They're actually using all the drones, the pole cams, all the different cameras to come into a central mobile command center that's usually right near the event. And LiveU was basically this is the example of the same installation we had there that was also feeding all their mobile commands, as well as giving access to those same feeds to people in Washington because they wanted to say, hey, what's going on over there? How is the security? What is happening? And so they're able to share these same links and get that information. So that's kind of all I had. These were extra slides. Anyway, sorry to hit the escape button. Any questions at all? We have, we'll actually have LRD in our booth here a little bit. When we get back downstairs, I'll turn this back on and we can, they won't let me fly it indoors, unfortunately, but I do have the little drone as well. And then we've got the bigger brother to these 2 units. So as you can see on this one, all I'm really doing is Chuck moves the dog around. I could actually pilot the dog from here, but you're actually seeing the actual unit transmit. Right now I'm seeing it about 6 megabits per second, and it's going across 4 different modems. And it's actually sharing that live feed. So right now it's saying, you know what, believe it or not, AT&T is pretty good, T-Mo is okay, Verizon not so well, but it's sort of load balancing all those, and it's taking whatever the dog sees as he moves and sharing that around. So, and I don't know if the dog went to sleep or not. It's the dog went to sleep. Oh, is it the remote? Oh, I was going to say, did I? There he goes. Okay. Yeah. So you can see. Yeah, I was going to say, because you can see him. He dances all around, but you can see the video feed change back in here. So, anyway, that's sort of the technology. There's got to be a couple of questions. I'm sorry? He's for sale. Yes, so that dog is made by a Chinese company called Unitree, and they've got 3 different models of that dog. And you can also get modifications on it. I've seen military applications with a flamethrower. I've seen people put a tray on it and have them deliver drinks. It's it's a dog that doesn't require cleaning the carpet. It does have a name, and I thought it was on here, but it's a Unitree. I can get you the model as soon as I turn him down. But yeah, it's a Unitree. Can't remember. Yeah, Unitree. I named him Spot, but that was just But yeah, so. And I'm actually controlling him right now via just a direct connection to the phone, but you can also use a Wi-Fi connection as well. It doesn't really matter. And all I'm doing is just when I hit go, it shows me the camera, both the regular camera view and the LiDAR view. Yeah, so that believe it or not, with that dog and also the Boston Dynamics, you can actually train that one so that if I'm walking, my phone's right here, it'll just follow along. And then it'll also run with you and everything else. We literally opened it up this yesterday and started playing with it. And I'm like, okay, we need to play with it a little bit more. So, but Really? Yeah, and you know what's funny? You mentioned Tesla. We're actually doing a lot of work with Starlink, obviously, because they have the low Earth satellites, and a lot of folks need coverage where cellular isn't. But we're also doing work with SpaceX. So every SpaceX launch actually has a LiveU unit that's actually showing the cameras around the SpaceX launches. So that's another place where you see LiveU, but it's, you know, it's interesting.
Are you getting people who purchase the technology for creative purposes?
So, interesting question. So what LiveU's always been is a point-to-point solution, right? We don't really record video. We always have been the, you know, point or point-to-multipoint. But during the NFL draft last year, we did a bunch of testing, and now we have a DVR functionality. And the reason that's cool is what happened in the draft, if you watch the NFL draft, and now it's a big to-do, is we actually gave the top 10 people got one of these units, right? We kind of knew who they were just when they were coming on. Yeah. But then all the other athletes, we were like, okay, we can't give out, you know, 300 of these. So we actually gave them a cell phone app that turned their LiveU, or turned their cell phone into a LiveU encoder. And so each one of those guys got one, and so what they did was they would do their live interview. Oh, okay, I got picked. Well, that could have been filmed 10 minutes ago, but what happened is I was live streaming it, I recorded it, and then I gave it to the broadcaster to say, here, top tail, send it out, top tail. So that's why it always looked so good, and they actually had the cut right on time, because they weren't doing it real. They were doing it a little bit before. We were just recording and allowed them to delay play. So we do have a record function of anything that comes into the cloud can actually record, and a lot of times for this same use case, they actually want that later.
Is that similar to like Shaquille O'Neal? It's like slam dunk contest or something like that. You have a cell phone.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can turn the cell phone into a LiveU encoder. The challenge is, instead of having 4 modems, I've got 1 SIM and maybe WAN, right? So you're only as good as the cell phone coverage. But you know, I always tell, you know, like all of our streamers and bloggers, I'm like, you can use your cell phone until it doesn't work, and then you go to black and lose your audience. Wouldn't you be better to have one of these and you don't lose your audience? Because that's how they make their money, as sponsors and everything else. So they take one of these and carry it around, and even though it's heavier than the phone, you don't go black.
And that is
This is an LU300 encoder, and that's so it's basically the same as that Recon. Yeah.
Cell phones that shoot broadcast put us all out of work. We really don't want technology to get
Yeah.
They've done too much, it's already cost me money already.
Yes. Yes. The trick here is now we're paying all the providers for the coverage, right? So it's, you know, domestically it's AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and we sort of manage those SIMs for you, or you can provide your own depending on your relationships with them. But yeah. So
What's the price point of the LUs?
these units are, they rent for about $1,500 a week or $2,200 a month, or you can buy them for around 10. Or you can rent them for the year, you know, rent them like a phone, and they'll end up being like $600 a month, and then after a couple of years you say, give me the newest phone, and we get you the newest unit. Because what happens is, this is not like a computer, it's like a cell phone, actually 4 cell phones. What happens is we go from 4G to 5G to 5G plus, whatever. You don't want the 3G unit when it's like having an iPhone 11. It really is not great now. So you always want to have the latest version of these. So these can last 5 years, but year 4 and 5, you're on the older phone. Right? So it's how fast the cellular technology changes, which is usually about 18 months. They're coming up with something new.
So did I understand you correctly? You can do a live feed with that and record it
Yep.
at the same time?
Yep. So right now I'm just wirelessly connected to that, connecting to my phone, but I could actually, as I'm sending that signal through, I could hit the record button and it could just record all the time. And so for security reasons, you would understand why, hey, I'm just put this on a 7x24 loop for, all right, 7 days and have it eat its tail, and then it's like a security system. And so whatever that dog sees around the perimeter, it's just recording that all the time, and I can go back up to 7 days, just like a regular security system, which is kind of where Boston Dynamics has made its name.
So when you pay the unit, that means you pay also the service for that whole
Correct.
area.
Yeah, so once you own the unit, you're just paying the cell carriers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid that you
Sure.
The DVR functionality, you guys are recording that in your SaaS service, and then I get access to it, or?
Correct. So what's happening is this video signal via LRT is going up to AWS. We're just hitting a record button in AWS. So we don't really want to be a storage provider. We're just going to say, hey, we're going to record 7 days. If you want more, give me an S3 bucket, and we'll put it in your storage, right? The idea being we're going to give you the service, but we don't want to be a storage company. We want to.
Right, but it will go to LiveU's VPC, and then from there.
Yep. Exactly. You'll have our command and control interface will be in our VPC. You'll have access, and then you could say record and put it here on my S3 bucket. So, any other questions? Sorry, we went down a deep dark hole there. But, okay. Well, then I think we're done. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.